Hello, this is the Economic Competition and the Role of the Government Section B lecture. Our prioritized standard is Economic Standard 23, and objectively, you'll be able to identify some of the regulatory roles of the government over the economy. Regulation of business to ensure competition in industries is an important responsibility of the government, since when there is a lack of competition in an industry, there is no guarantee the scarce resources will be allocated to their most productive uses. Sometimes a lack of competition cannot actually be avoided, as is seen with a natural monopoly, which is when one producer can supply total output in an industry at a lower cost than can multiple producers dividing the production.
So when we talk about utility companies, that is commonly considered a monopoly. A lot of those companies are actually considered natural monopolies. Why? Well, because it's so difficult and expensive to produce, like, say, an electric company, that it doesn't make sense that you would have multiple businesses doing that. So naturally, you would become a monopoly. Oh, clever. So natural monopolies tend to be more efficient because of a concept called economies of scale. Economies of scale, this means low production costs resulting from the large size of output. So if you are doing something on a very small scale, then it's going to be more expensive for you to produce than if you're doing it on a larger scale. And on the largest scales, they're going to be able to do it for even the cheapest prices. So kind of like when you buy Sam's Club, some things it doesn't make sense to get at Sam's Club because it's really expensive. But if you're producing in bulk, it's going to make a lot more sense. So therefore, since you can produce in bulk, usually you're getting discounts in price. When natural monopolies exist, the government actually does regulate them very closely to guarantee quality and fair prices are actually being offered. In the United States, laws and government regulations have been adopted to maintain competition, which are known as antitrust laws. If you don't know what a trust is a monopoly. So we have laws that can actually limit the formation of monopolies. One of those such laws, the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, which was used famously by Theodore Roosevelt in the early 1900s, made it illegal to create a monopoly or enter into a conspiracy to restrain trade. Now, I should point out that doesn't actually mean that all monopolies are illegal. It just means monopolies that are restraining trade are illegal ones, or conspiracies to try to restrain trade are illegal. Just monopolies in and of itself, not necessarily illegal. The government does allow some monopolies to exist. Also, we have the Clayton Antitrust Act of 1914. This did something the Sherman Act didn't do. It actually had penalties. It had a little more ability to enforce it because it gave a broader idea of what was meant by an illegal monopoly. The Clayton Act prohibited price discrimination, meaning you can't charge different people different prices for the same product. Tying contracts, you can't force people to buy one item to get another item they actually do want. You can't have interlocking directorates, which means you can't have people on a board of directors for two different businesses in the same industry. And it also prohibited mergers that lessen competition. You can't have mergers, but if the entire purpose of the merger is just to lessen competition, generally speaking, those can't go on without government approval.
There are additionally several regulatory agencies to help ensure business competition, including the Federal Trade Commission, which is an independent agency that investigates private businesses engaging in unfair trade practices, and the FTC, as a for instance, can actually issue cease and desist orders to companies that are using unfair means of competition, meaning they can actually close down those businesses. The government sometimes will intervene into industries that produce externalities.
Externalities. These exist when some of the cost or benefits that are associated with production or consumption of a good or service actually spill over to third parties other than the direct producers and consumers. So people that aren't paying for it are actually still getting some of these things even though. So these are like side effects, leftovers that other people are getting.
When an action of a product imposes a negative side effect on a third party, it is considered a negative externality or a social cost. One example would be secondhand smoke or pollution from a factory. Those are considered social costs and therefore negative externalities. Now, when an action of a product imposes a positive side effect on third party, it is considered a positive externality or a social benefit. This can also lead to what's called a free rider problem, where you have some people that pay for a product, but other people that benefit even though they don't actually pay for it. One example of a positive externality would be like a dam that was produced for hydroelectricity that additionally is providing flood control for the people that live downstream from it, and also providing for a recreational lake from the water that's being held back. The social benefits created through positive externalities encourage the creation of public goods, which are goods or services the government supplies in situations involving shared consumption and non exclusion.
This brings us to a couple things. Shared consumption product. This is a product that can be used by more than one person at the same time or simultaneously without reducing the amount of the product that's available for others to produce. So, for instance, look at this, multiple cars on the same roads. It doesn't actually affect their ability to use the roads. Multiple can use it at the same time. It doesn't hurt anything. You got library, multiple people going to the library. It doesn't affect anyone if multiple people are going to the library. Multiple people go to school. It doesn't affect anyone if multiple people are at the same school at the same time. It's like public goods can be used by multiple people at the same time, and it doesn't really hurt anything. Also, public goods are also characterized by being non-exclusion products, meaning a product that once produced cannot actually be withheld even from those who do not pay for it. So we pay for highways with gasoline tax, but if you had a bike and you don't actually have to pay for gasoline, you could still use that road. There's nothing that stops you from using that road. So you're benefiting from it. You can't be excluded even though you didn't actually pay for it. Public school. So Oliver Springs, we have a nice percentage of the population that is out of county. So you're not actually paying for the facilities, but we still let you have the facilities when you're here. So all of these might be used by people that didn't actually pay for that.
Some examples of public goods include national defense, public education, highways, libraries, flood control, street lights. There's many, many more examples beyond just that.
When the government provides public goods, they're responding to perceived social needs. So generally speaking, if they don't feel like there's a need for roads, they're not going to produce those roads. If they don't feel like there's a need for schools, they're not going to produce those schools. If there's not a need for hydroelectricity, they're not going to produce that. So they're not going to produce anything unless they feel like it is meeting some type of social need.
Rather than producing public goods, oftentimes the government will incentivize or encourage private businesses to produce goods or services with positive externalities, or disincentivize or discourage private businesses from producing goods or services with negative externalities. Private businesses can be directly incentivized in a variety of ways. For instance, decreasing of taxes can incentivize businesses. Also, decreasing of government regulations can incentivize businesses. Providing of government subsidies and grants, so that's basically free money from the government. Things like research and development grants, also education grants can be ways this can be done. And also the issuing of patents and copyrights that give businesses exclusive rights in an industry for a set period of time. Now, private businesses can also be directly disincentivized by the government in a variety of ways. For instance, increasing of taxes can disincentivize businesses. Increasing of government regulations can be used to disincentivize businesses, and also revoking of government subsidies and grants. Now, public policies aimed at encouraging competition, intervening due to externalities, and also incentivizing private businesses are very costly activities and are only economically justified when the expected benefits outweigh the cost.
Now, in addition to the things we previously talked about, the government also promotes full employment, stable prices and reasonable rates of economic growth, which is sometimes known as stabilizing the economy, which is a concept that we will discuss in depth in future units.
All right, this concludes Economic Competition, the Role of the Government, Section B lecture. Our prioritized standard again was Economic Standard 23, and objectively, now you can identify some of the regulatory roles of the government over the economy.